Keith stared at the ceiling fan as it rotated in a hypnotic rhythm above his bed. Another day had ended, indistinguishable from the countless others before it. Work had been draining. Endless meetings, demanding clients, and a boss who seemed perpetually dissatisfied. Now, in the sanctuary of his small apartment, he could finally exhale. The bedside clock glowed 11:42 p.m. Outside, the occasional car passed, its headlights briefly illuminating his walls before disappearing, leaving only darkness once more. Keith had established a nightly ritual. Shower, teeth, check phone one last time, then sink into his mattress with a book until his eyelids grew heavy. Tonight was no different. His apartment was the definition of ordinary, a one-bedroom with minimal decoration, functional furniture, and just enough personal touches to make it feel like a home rather than merely a place to sleep. Photos of family and friends adorned a small shelf. A potted plant that had miraculously survived his inconsistent watering schedule sat by the window. Keith hadn't always lived alone. 2 years ago, after his relationship with Sophia ended, he'd moved here to start fresh. Sometimes he still caught himself reaching for her in the middle of the night, his hand finding only empty sheets. He'd adjusted his solitude, even grown comfortable with it, but occasionally, like tonight, the silence felt particularly profound. He was halfway through a chapter of his novel when a sound broke his concentration. At first, he thought he'd imagined it, a subtle tap, like fingernails gently rapping against wood. He lowered his book and listened. Nothing. Then it came again, slightly louder this time. Someone was knocking on his door. Keith glanced at the clock again. 11:53 p.m. Who would visit at this hour? He hadn't ordered food. His neighbors generally kept to themselves. For a moment, he considered ignoring it, pretending to be asleep. The knock repeated, soft but unmistakable. "Coming," Keith called, setting his book aside and swinging his legs over the edge of the bed. He pulled on a t-shirt to complement his pajama pants and padded down the short hallway to the door. Peering through the peephole revealed nothing but a distorted emptiness. Curious and slightly unnerved, he unlatched the deadbolt and opened the door. The figure before him stole his breath away. She, at least Keith instinctively categorized the being as female, stood just below his height, draped in what appeared to be a flowing garment that shifted colors like an oil slick in sunlight. Deep purples giving way to blues, then teals, then back again. Her skin held a subtle lavender tint that seemed to emit the faintest luminescence, as if lit from within. But it was her eyes that truly captivated him. Large, almond-shaped, and a piercing silver that seemed to see through him rather than at him. Keith blinked rapidly, convinced he must be hallucinating. The woman's face was delicately structured, with high cheekbones and a small, perfect nose. Her hair, or what appeared to be hair, floated around her head like tendrils underwater, dark with occasional flashes of iridescence. "May I sleep beside you tonight, human?" The voice was melodic, feminine, with an accent Keith couldn't place. Something between British and Scandinavian, but with unfamiliar cadences that made certain syllables linger in the air. Keith's mouth opened and closed several times before he managed to form words. What? Who are you?" he finally stammered. The being's luminous silver eyes blinked slowly. A slight crease appeared between her eyebrows. "My name is Megan," she replied, the name sounding oddly terrestrial coming from such an otherworldly creature. "And I need—" She hesitated, seeming to search for the right word. "Comfort." Keith's mind raced through possibilities. Was this an elaborate prank? A hallucination brought on by exhaustion? Had he fallen asleep reading and was now dreaming? Or was he face to face with an actual extraterrestrial being asking to share his bed? "Are you real?" he blurted, immediately feeling foolish. A small smile curved her lips. "As real as you are." She raised a slender hand, hesitated, then extended it toward him. Keith stared at the offered hand. It had 5 fingers, like his own, though longer and more delicate, with the same subtle purple hue as her face. Against his better judgment, he reached out and touched it. Warm, solid, unmistakably real. He pulled back, startled. "Why me? Why my apartment?" Megan's expression shifted to something Keith recognized despite her alien features: vulnerability. Exhaustion lined her otherworldly face, and her shoulders slumped slightly. "I have been observing humans," she said softly, "learning your ways. I am alone here. I have seen how humans find comfort in sleeping near one another. I need that tonight." Her voice dropped even lower. "Please." Keith stood frozen in his doorway, common sense warring with curiosity and an unexpected surge of compassion. Every rational part of his brain screamed danger, but something in her eyes, a genuine weariness, a profound loneliness that transcended whatever differences existed between them, resonated deeply within him. "You won't harm me?" He felt ridiculous asking, like a character in a B-movie. Megan shook her head. "I seek only peaceful rest beside you. Nothing more." A long moment passed while Keith weighed his options. Finally, curiosity and compassion won out. "All right," he said, stepping aside. "You can come in." Relief washed visibly over Megan's features. She nodded gratefully and glided past him into the apartment, her fluid movements reinforcing her otherworldliness. Keith closed the door behind her, wondering what exactly he had just invited into his home. Megan stood in the center of his small living room, taking in her surroundings with obvious fascination. The ordinary furniture, a worn couch, a coffee table stacked with magazines, a small television, seemed to intrigue her. She approached his bookshelf and delicately traced a finger along the spines. "These contain your stories?" she asked. "Yes," Keith replied, still trying to process the situation. "Books, novels, mostly." She nodded as if confirming something she already knew. The silence stretched between them, thick with questions Keith didn't know how to articulate. "So," he finally managed, "you're not from Earth?" Megan turned from the bookshelf. "No." She offered no elaboration. "And you? Sleep? Like humans do. My species rests, though not precisely as you do." She tilted her head slightly. "But I wish to experience your form of rest. The shared comfort of it." Keith nodded slowly, still half convinced he was dreaming. "Well, I guess we should go to the bedroom then." The words sounded ridiculous to his own ears, but Megan simply nodded and followed as he led the way back to his room. The bedroom seemed smaller with her in it. Keith suddenly became acutely aware of the rumpled sheets, the stack of laundry he hadn't yet put away, the water glass on the nightstand. Ordinary human disorder that now seemed embarrassingly untidy in the presence of this ethereal being. Megan approached the bed cautiously, examining it with obvious curiosity. She reached out and pressed a hand against the mattress, watching it depress beneath her touch, then spring back. "This is softer than I expected," she commented. "It's memory foam," Keith replied automatically, then realized how meaningless that would be to her. "It shapes itself to your body." Megan placed both hands on the mattress now, leaning slightly to test its give. "And these?" She gestured to the pillows. "Those support your head while you sleep. And this?" She touched the comforter. "That keeps you warm." Megan nodded thoughtfully. "Show me how you use them." Keith felt oddly like a museum docent explaining human artifacts. He moved to the far side of the bed and pulled back the covers. "You lie down here," he demonstrated by sitting on the bed. "Rest your head on the pillow," he patted it, "and pull the blanket over you for warmth." Megan watched intently, then moved to the other side of the bed. With careful, deliberate movements, she lowered herself onto the mattress. Her flowing garment somehow adjusted around her as she sat, then lay down, her silvery eyes fixed on the ceiling. "The pillow," Keith reminded gently. She lifted her head and positioned on the pillow, then looked at him expectantly. "Now the blanket," he said, holding up his side of the comforter. Megan mirrored his action, pulling the blanket over herself. A small sigh escaped her lips as the weight settled over her body. "It's pleasant," she said, sounding genuinely surprised. Keith nodded, settling himself more comfortably on his side of the bed, maintaining a respectful distance. The situation felt surreal. He was in bed with an alien who had knocked on his door past midnight, asking for comfort. "May I ask?" Keith began, then paused, unsure how to phrase his question politely. Why did you choose me? Out of all the humans you could have approached. Megan was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was contemplative. I observed many humans. Most live in groups, families, couples. You live alone. Your energy is kind, non-threatening. She turned her head to look at him, and you seemed lonely too. The assessment was so direct, so accurate, that Keith felt momentarily exposed. He had grown accustomed to his solitude, had convinced himself it was a choice rather than a circumstance, but hearing it stated so plainly by this stranger made him realize how transparent his loneliness must be. I am lonely sometimes, he admitted. Most people are, I think. Even those who live together. Sometimes, especially those who live together, Keith said with a small smile. You can be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone. Megan considered this. That is counterintuitive. Human emotions often are. They lapsed into silence again, but it felt less strained now. Keith was growing accustomed to her presence, strange as it was. The soft glow emanating from her skin provided just enough light to see her features in the darkness. Your species, Keith ventured. Do they sleep alone or together? We do not sleep as you do, Megan replied. Our rest is more functional, a period of energy conservation and mental processing. It is typically done in isolation. So why seek out human sleeping habits? Megan's brow furrowed slightly, creating tiny creases in her luminescent skin. I have been studying your kind for some time. The way you find comfort in proximity, in physical closeness, intrigue me. We do not have this same need. She paused, but I find myself wanting to understand it, to experience it. Are there others like you here? On Earth, I mean. A shadow passed over her face. There were. Not anymore. The implication hung in the air between them. Keith wanted to ask more, but sensed her reluctance. Instead, he asked, how long have you been here? By your measurement of time? Approximately 3 of your Earth years. That's a long time to be alone, Keith said softly. Megan's eyes met his. Yes, it is. The simple acknowledgement created a bridge between them, a shared understanding of isolation that transcended their obvious differences. What do humans think about before sleep? Megan asked, changing the subject. Keith smiled. All sorts of things. The day we've had. Things we need to do tomorrow. People we care about. Worries, hopes, random memories. It sounds chaotic. It can be. That's why many of us have trouble falling asleep. Our minds won't quiet down. And what helps? Keith thought for a moment. Different things work for different people. Reading, soft music, meditation. Having someone beside you can help too. It's comforting. Makes you feel safe, I guess. Safe from what? Not necessarily safe from anything specific. Just not alone with your thoughts. There's something primal about it. Humans evolved as social creatures. Sleeping in groups meant protection from predators. I think we still carry that instinct. Megan nodded thoughtfully. Your species' need for connection is fascinating. We communicate efficiently, share information when needed, but the emotional bonds you form. She trailed off. Don't your people form emotional connections? Keith asked. Not in the same way. We recognize biological imperatives, reproduction, protection of offspring, but the complex emotional attachments humans develop, the seeking of comfort for its own sake. She shook her head slightly. It's uniquely human, as far as I have observed. That sounds lonely, Keith said. It is our nature, Megan replied simply. Or it was. I find myself changing since coming to Earth, experiencing sensations that have no precedent in my understanding. Like what? Longing, emptiness, the desire for this. She gestured vaguely at the space between them on the bed. Keith found himself deeply moved by her confession. Whatever she was, wherever she came from, she was experiencing loneliness just as he did, perhaps even more acutely, being so far from anything familiar. It's okay to want connection, he said softly. It's part of being alive, I think. Not just human. Megan considered his words. Perhaps you were right. They continued talking, the initial awkwardness gradually dissolving as they exchanged thoughts about their respective worlds. Keith described ordinary human rituals, meals with friends, holiday celebrations, the comfort of a hug. Megan spoke of her home in measured terms, revealing little concrete information but painting a picture of a highly ordered society where efficiency was prized above all else. "No wonder you find us chaotic," Keith said with a small laugh after she described how her people scheduled their activities with precise timing. "Chaotic, yes," Megan agreed, "but vibrant in your chaos. There is beauty in it I had not anticipated." As they talked, Keith noticed that Megan's initial stiffness had given way to a more relaxed posture. She had sunk deeper into the mattress, her head nestled comfortably against the pillow. The glow of her skin had dimmed slightly, creating a softer, more intimate atmosphere. "You seem more comfortable now," Keith observed. "I am," she admitted. "This position is surprisingly pleasant. And the weight of this," she stroked the comforter, "provides an unexpected sense of security. That's why weighted blankets are popular," Keith said. "The pressure is calming. Your species has scientifically investigated the comfort of sleep." Megan sounded impressed. "Oh, definitely. We spend about a third of our lives sleeping, so we've put a lot of thought into making it better." "Fascinating." Their conversation flowed more naturally now, punctuated by comfortable silences. Keith found himself relaxing in her presence, the initial shock of her appearance fading as her personality emerged. She was thoughtful, curious, and possessed a dry wit that occasionally surfaced in her observations about human behavior. As the night deepened, their words grew fewer and the silences longer. Keith felt his eyelids growing heavy, the day's fatigue catching up with him. He stifled a yawn. "You require sleep now," Megan stated, noticing his drowsiness. "Yeah, I should probably get some rest," Keith admitted. "Do you? Will you actually sleep too?" "I will enter a resting state similar to your sleep," she explained. "But I wanted to ask." She hesitated. "What is it?" "I have observed that humans often maintain physical contact during sleep, arms around each other or hands touching. Would this be possible?" The request caught Keith off guard. He had grown comfortable talking with Megan, but physical contact seemed like crossing another threshold entirely. Yet he couldn't deny a certain curiosity, and her request was made with such genuine interest that refusing felt somehow unkind. "We could hold hands, maybe," he suggested, offering what seemed like the least intimate option. Megan considered this, then nodded. "I would like to try that." Cautiously, Keith extended his hand into the space between them. Megan studied it for a moment, then slowly reached out her own. When their hands met, Keith was again struck by how warm and substantial hers felt, not at all what he might have expected from her ethereal appearance. Her fingers intertwined with his tentatively at first, then with more confidence. The sensation was pleasant, comforting in its simplicity, a basic human connection that suddenly seemed profound in this context. "Your hand is warmer than I expected," Megan said softly. "So is yours," Keith replied with a small smile. They lay in silence, hands joined in the space between them. Keith watched as Megan's eyes drifted closed, her breathing becoming deeper and more rhythmic. The glow of her skin dimmed further, until only the faintest luminescence remained. In the near darkness, with her features softened by shadows, she looked almost human. "Thank you, Keith," she murmured, her voice thick with approaching sleep, "for allowing me this experience." "You're welcome," he whispered back. "Good night, Megan." "Good night, human," she replied, a smile in her voice. Keith lay awake a while longer, marveling at the strange turn his ordinary evening had taken. Just hours ago, he had been alone, reading in bed, another solitary night in a long sequence of them. Now he was holding hands with a being from another world, finding unexpected comfort in her presence. As sleep claimed him, his last conscious thought was that loneliness might be universal, but so too was the capacity for connection, even across differences far greater than he had ever imagined possible. Keith woke to sunlight streaming through his bedroom window. For a moment, he lay perfectly still, wondering if the events of the previous night had been an unusually vivid dream. Then he turned his head and saw her. Megan lay beside him, her eyes closed, her chest rising and falling with steady breaths. In the bright morning light, her skin's lavender hue was more subtle but still unmistakable. Their hands remained loosely intertwined between them. Not a dream, then. Keith studied her sleeping form, noticing details he had missed in the darkness. Her hair appeared more substantial now, less fluid, falling around her face in what resembled dark, iridescent strands. The clothing she wore seemed to have transformed during the night, now appearing more like conventional human sleepwear, still shifting in color, but in a subtler way. Her face in repose looked peaceful, the alienness of her features somehow less pronounced. As if sensing his gaze, Megan's eyes opened. The silver irises caught the morning light, reflecting it like polished metal. "Good morning," Keith said softly. "Morning," she replied, the word sounding slightly unfamiliar on her tongue. "You slept well." "I did, actually. Better than I have in a while." "You." "My rest was profound, different from what I am accustomed to." She looked at their still joined hands with evident fascination. The continuous contact throughout the night provided an unexpected sense of stability. Keith smiled. "That's a good way to describe it." Megan released his hand and sat up, looking around the room with renewed interest now that it was fully illuminated. "Your dwelling appears different in daylight." "Everything does," Keith said, sitting up as well. "Are you? Do you need to leave now?" He realized he had no idea what her usual routine might be, or if she had obligations elsewhere. Megan hesitated. "I should return to my temporary dwelling. I have data to process and communications to send." Her formal phrasing reminded Keith sharply of their differences, which had seemed less significant during their nighttime conversations. "Of course," he nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. "I understand." They sat in silence for a moment, neither moving to get up. "Thank you," Megan finally said, turning to face him fully, "for allowing me to experience this aspect of human existence. It was enlightening." "It was nice for me, too," Keith admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. "I've been alone for a while now. It was good to have company, even if—" He trailed off, not sure how to encapsulate the strangeness of their situation. "Even if I am not human," Megan completed his thought. "Well, yes, but that's not what I meant exactly. Just that it's an unusual circumstance. Not how people typically meet." Megan's lips curved in a small smile. "No, I suppose not." Another silence fell between them, this one charged with unasked questions and unexplored possibilities. "Would it be permissible," Megan began carefully, "for me to return again? Perhaps tonight." The request sent a ripple of surprise through Keith. "You want to come back?" "If you're amenable to it. I find I wish to continue exploring this experience." Keith considered the proposal. By all rational measures, he should be wary, should have questions about who or what exactly she was, where she came from, what her true intentions might be. Yet the night they had shared had been marked by a simple, genuine connection that felt too real to doubt. "Yes," he heard himself say, "I'd like that." The smile that transformed Megan's face was radiant, literally, as the glow of her skin brightened momentarily with her emotion. "Thank you. I will return after darkness falls." They rose from the bed somewhat awkwardly, the practical reality of morning asserting itself. Keith offered Megan use of his bathroom, which she declined with a polite shake of her head. He realized he had no idea if her species had the same biological needs as humans and felt too embarrassed to ask. He walked her to the door, neither speaking but both seemingly reluctant for her departure. At the threshold, Megan turned to him once more. "The comfort we shared last night, it is something my kind does not practice. Yet I found it deeply satisfying." She paused, a slight furrow appearing between her brows. "Is it typical for humans to feel enhanced well-being after such shared rest?" Keith nodded. "It's why people don't like sleeping alone, generally. It's comforting to have someone you trust nearby." "Trust," Megan repeated, as if testing the word. "Yes, I believe that is a key component. I trusted you last night, though I had no logical basis for doing so." "I trusted you too," Keith replied. "Sometimes you just sense things about people." "Indeed." She studied his face for a moment longer, then inclined her head slightly. "Until tonight, Keith." "Until tonight," he echoed. She stepped through the doorway, and Keith watched as she walked down the hall toward the stairwell. There was something different about her gait now, less gliding, more human. She turned the corner and was gone. Keith closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. Had that really happened? He looked around his apartment. Everything was normal, ordinary, exactly as it should be. Yet he felt fundamentally changed. He went through his morning routine in a daze, showering and dressing for work on autopilot, while his mind replayed moments from the night before. The softness in Megan's voice as she described her loneliness. The warmth of her hand in his. The peaceful rhythm of her breathing as she slept beside him. As he prepared to leave for work, Keith paused at the door, a sudden thought striking him. What if she didn't come back? What if last night had been a one-time encounter, a brief intersection of their utterly different lives? The possibility left him with an unexpected hollowness in his chest. No, she had said she would return, and something in him trusted that she would. The workday passed in a blur. Keith's colleagues noticed his distraction, but he deflected their questions with vague mentions of poor sleep. In truth, he had slept better than he had in months. It was the waking world that now seemed dreamlike in comparison to what he had experienced. By the time he arrived home that evening, anticipation had built within him to an almost unbearable degree. He cleaned his apartment, something he normally did only when expecting company or out of boredom on weekends, and changed his bed sheets. He even stopped at a store on the way home and purchased a second pillow, as he realized the one Megan had used was actually his only one. The small act of preparation made her return feel more real, more certain. As darkness fell, Keith found himself repeatedly checking the time. Would she come at the same hour as before? Earlier? Later? He had no way to contact her, no means of confirming their arrangement. At 10:43 p.m., a gentle knock sounded at his door. Keith's heart leapt. He took a deep breath to compose himself, then crossed the room and opened the door. Megan stood before him, her silver eyes meeting his. "Hello, Keith." "Hi," he replied, a smile spreading across his face of its own accord. "You came back. I said I would." She tilted her head slightly. "Did you doubt me?" "No," he lied, stepping aside to let her enter. "I'm just glad to see you." Megan moved past him into the apartment, and Keith noticed that her appearance had changed subtly since the morning. Her clothing still shifted in color, but was now structured more like a simple dress than the flowing, formless garment of the previous night. Her hair appeared more definitively styled, falling around her shoulders in what resembled a human cut, though still with that strange iridescence. Even her movements seemed more deliberate, less ethereally fluid. "You look different," he observed. She nodded. "I have been adapting my external presentation to better align with human expectations. It facilitates easier interaction." "You don't have to change for me," Keith said, feeling oddly protective of her alien nature. Megan's expression softened. "The adaptation is minor and serves a practical purpose. My essential self remains unchanged." "Good," Keith said, then felt foolish for his response. Who was he to have opinions about how an extraterrestrial being should present herself? An awkward silence descended, the easy rapport of the previous night temporarily lost. They stood in his living room, neither quite sure how to proceed. "Would you like some tea?" Keith finally offered, grasping for the familiar human ritual of hospitality. Megan looked momentarily confused, then understanding dawned. "Ah, the heated beverage made from plant leaves. I have observed humans consuming it. Yes, I would like to try this." Keith smiled and moved to the kitchen, grateful for the purpose it provided. He filled the kettle and set it to boil, then retrieved 2 mugs from the cabinet. "Do you eat and drink like we do?" he asked, realizing he knew almost nothing about her physical needs. "My physiology allows me to process your nutrition for energy, yes," Megan replied, following him into the kitchen. "Though I do not require sustenance as frequently as humans do. But you can taste things, experience flavors." "Yes, though perhaps not with the same range of sensations you do." I've been experimenting with your foods. Some are quite interesting. The kettle whistled, and Keith prepared 2 cups of chamomile tea, adding a spoonful of honey to each. He handed one to Megan, who accepted it carefully, wrapping both hands around the warm mug as she had likely seen humans do. She brought it to her lips and took a cautious sip. Her eyes widened slightly. "It is pleasant," she declared. "The temperature and the sweetness. It produces a calming effect." "That's the idea," Keith smiled. "Chamomile tea is often drunk before bed. It's relaxing." They moved to the couch, sitting side by side, but not touching, sipping their tea in companionable silence. The initial awkwardness began to dissipate as they settled into each other's presence once more. "I analyzed our interaction from last night," Megan said after a while. "The physical proximity, the verbal exchange of personal information, the shared unconscious state. It created a form of intimacy I have not previously experienced." Keith nodded, touched by her analytical yet heartfelt assessment. "That's a good description of it. I wish to understand it better, to explore the parameters of this human comfort further, if you are willing." "What did you have in mind?" Keith asked, both curious and slightly nervous. Megan set down her mug and turned to face him more directly. "In my observations of humans, I have noted that physical contact extends beyond merely holding hands. There are embraces, the touching of faces, bodies positioned in close proximity." Her directness was both endearing and mildly embarrassing. "I would like to experience more of these forms of connection, if it would not make you uncomfortable." Keith felt his pulse quicken. "You mean, like hugging? Or cuddling?" "Yes, those terms are appropriate." He considered her request. There was something undeniably strange about the situation. She was, after all, not human. Yet the connection between them felt genuine, and her desire to understand human closeness touched him deeply. "We could try that," he said softly. "If you want to." Megan nodded, a look of determination on her face that made Keith smile. She approached this like a scientific exploration, while for him, it was becoming something far more emotionally complex. They finished their tea and, by unspoken agreement, moved to the bedroom. Keith had left a small lamp on, casting a warm glow over the room. The fresh sheets and dual pillows awaited them. "You purchased another head support," Megan observed, noticing the second pillow. "A pillow, yes," Keith confirmed, oddly moved that she had noticed. "I thought you might come back." That was thoughtful. She seemed genuinely touched by the small gesture. They prepared for bed with less awkwardness than the previous night, each taking a side naturally. Keith had changed into his usual sleep attire of t-shirt and pajama pants before she arrived. Megan's clothing seemed to shift slightly as she lay down, becoming more appropriate for sleep, though he couldn't quite discern how the transformation occurred. They lay side by side, a small space between them, both staring at the ceiling. "In my observations," Megan began, "humans often lie with their bodies in contact. One person's head on the other's chest, or arms around each other." "That's true," Keith agreed, his mouth suddenly dry. "It's called cuddling. Would you demonstrate this cuddling with me?" Keith turned to look at her. The request was made with such earnest curiosity that any hesitation he felt melted away. "Sure, there are different ways to cuddle. Usually, one person is the big spoon, and the other is the little spoon." "Eating utensils?" Megan looked confused. Keith laughed softly. "No, it's just an expression. It refers to the way 2 spoons can nest together. The big spoon curls around the little spoon from behind." "I see. Which would I be?" "Either. Whatever you're comfortable with." Megan considered this. "I would like to experience both positions, if possible, to compare the sensations." "We can do that," Keith said. "Let's start with you as the little spoon. You lie on your side, facing away from me." Megan complied, turning on her side, her back to him. Keith moved closer and carefully placed an arm over her waist, his chest against her back, his knees tucked behind hers. He held his breath, half expecting her to pull away, but she remained still. "Is this comfortable for you?" he asked softly. "Yes," she replied. "It is. Secure. I can feel your heartbeat against my back. It is rhythmic and reassuring." Keith smiled, relaxing into the position. Her body was warm against her hair tickling his chin. Despite her alien nature, holding her felt remarkably natural, as if they had done this many times before. They lay like that for several minutes, Keith becoming increasingly aware of the pleasant weight of her against him, the subtle scent that emanated from her, something like vanilla and ozone, familiar yet not quite of this world. "Would you like to try being the big spoon now?" he eventually asked. "Yes," Megan replied. They carefully shifted positions, Keith turning to face away from her as she curled her body around his. Her arm draped over his waist, mirroring how he had held her. The sensation was different, but equally comforting, being held rather than holding. "This position provides a different type of security," Megan observed. "A sense of protectiveness." "That's a good way to describe it," Keith agreed. "Each position has a different feeling." "I find I enjoy both," Megan said, "though perhaps this one slightly more. I can see your face from here." Keith turned his head slightly and found her silver eyes watching him with that now familiar, curious intensity. "Is that important? Seeing my face?" "Yes," she replied simply. "Your expressions provide additional data about your emotional state. They help me understand if you're comfortable, happy, tense." She hesitated, then added, "I find I care about your comfort in a way that surprises me." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither was quite ready to explore. "I care about your comfort too," Keith said softly. They lapsed into silence, the physical closeness creating an intimacy that made words seem superfluous. Keith felt himself relaxing further into her embrace, his eyelids growing heavy. The gentle pressure of her arm across his waist, the warmth of her body against his back. It felt right in a way he couldn't have anticipated. "Keith." Megan's voice was soft near his ear. "Hmm?" he murmured, already half drifting towards sleep. "In my observations of humans, I've noticed that they often share thoughts before sleeping. Personal reflections, or wishes for the future. Is this common?" Keith smiled sleepily. "Yeah, that's pretty common. Pillow talk, we call it." "Pillow talk," she repeated, testing the phrase. "What would you typically share during this talk?" Keith considered the question, feeling strangely vulnerable. "Well, with someone you're close to, you might talk about your day, your hopes, your fears. Things you might not say in the light of day. The darkness facilitates honesty." "Something like that," Keith agreed. "There's an intimacy to it. When you're holding someone, when you can't see their face clearly but you can feel them next to you, it's easier to be truthful." "Would you share something truthful with me now?" Megan asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Keith was quiet for a moment, weighing her request. "Okay," he finally said. "The truth is, I've been lonely for a long time, longer than I like to admit. Even when I was with my ex-girlfriend, towards the end, I felt alone. But last night, sleeping beside you, someone I just met, someone not even from my world, was the least alone I've felt in years." He swallowed hard, surprised by his own candor. "That's probably weird." "It is not weird," Megan replied, her arm tightening slightly around his waist. "I understand the sentiment precisely. My kind does not experience loneliness as humans do. It is not part of our natural emotional landscape. Yet since coming to Earth, I have felt a lack, an emptiness that I could not categorize until recently." She paused. Last night, that emptiness was absent for the first time. Her honesty touched something deep within Keith. Without thinking, he placed his hand over hers where it rested against his chest. "Thank you for coming back tonight," he said. "Thank you for welcoming me," she replied. They fell silent again, the quiet punctuated only by their breathing, which had somehow synchronized without conscious effort. Keith felt himself drifting closer to sleep, comforted by Megan's presence in a way that seemed to transcend the physical. "Sleep well, Keith," Megan whispered. It was the last thing he heard before slipping into dreams. Morning came with soft light filtering through the curtains. Keith awoke to find himself still in Megan's embrace, her arm draped protectively over him. Unlike the previous morning, this time he felt no disorientation, no moment of questioning whether the night had been real. Her presence felt natural now, as if she belonged there. He lay still, not wanting to disturb her, enjoying the peaceful moment. Her breathing was deep and even against his back, suggesting she was still in her resting state. Keith found himself wondering what she dreamed about, if she dreamed at all. Eventually, Megan stirred behind him, her arm tightening briefly around his waist before relaxing. "Good morning," she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. Keith turned carefully within her embrace until he faced her. In the morning light, with her silver eyes half-lidded and her iridescent hair tousled from sleep, she looked both alien and somehow familiar, a contradiction that Keith found increasingly beautiful. "Good morning," he replied. "Did you sleep well?" "Very well. The position we maintained throughout the night enhanced the quality of my rest significantly." Her formal phrasing made Keith smile. Even in this intimate moment, she retained that slightly analytical perspective that was uniquely hers. "Mine too," Keith said. They remained facing each other, neither moving to get up. The moment felt suspended, precious in its simplicity. "I must leave soon," Megan said eventually, regret evident in her voice. "I have obligations I cannot postpone." Keith nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. "I understand. I have work today anyway." "Will you?" Megan hesitated, an unusual uncertainty crossing her features. "Would it be acceptable if I returned again tonight?" The question made Keith's heart leap unexpectedly. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "I like that very much." Relief washed over Megan's face. "I'm glad. I look forward to our nights together." The simple admission warmed Keith more than he could express. "So do I." They rose and prepared for the day, with a comfortable familiarity that belied the newness of their arrangement. As before, Keith walked Megan to the door, but this time the farewell felt different, a temporary parting rather than an uncertain end. At the threshold, Megan turned to face him. "Keith," she began, then stopped, seeming to search for words. "What is it?" he encouraged gently. "I am experiencing emotions that are not typical for my species. Anticipation of seeing you again, reluctance to leave, a sense of connection that extends beyond physical proximity." She looked troubled. "I do not fully understand these responses." Keith felt a surge of tenderness toward her. "Those sound like very human emotions to me." "Perhaps that is what concerns me," she admitted. "I'm not human, yet being with you makes me feel closer to humanity than I ever have before." "Is that a bad thing?" Keith asked softly. Megan considered the question seriously. "No," she finally decided. "It is not bad. It is merely unexpected." Keith smiled. The best things often are. This earned him a small smile in return, a genuine expression that transformed her alien features into something breathtakingly beautiful. "Until tonight," she said, echoing their farewell from the day before. "Until tonight," Keith replied. As she walked away down the hallway, Keith noticed that her movements had become even more human, the otherworldly glide now replaced by a natural walk. She was adapting, becoming more like him, even as he was becoming more accustomed to her differences. The pattern continued for several nights. Megan would arrive after dark. They would talk, sometimes over tea, sometimes lying side by side in bed, learning about each other's worlds, perspectives, experiences. They would fall asleep in each other's arms, alternating between positions, discovering which felt most comfortable for both of them. Morning would come, bringing with it the reluctant separation and the promise of reunion in the evening. With each night, their connection deepened. Keith learned about Megan's world, a planet orbiting a distant star, where her species had evolved a highly structured society focused on efficiency and knowledge. She described cities that sounded like geometric marvels, technologies beyond human understanding, yet a culture that prized function over feeling, progress over connection. "We do not have art as you understand it," she explained one night as they lay facing each other, her hand resting lightly on his cheek. "Beauty is recognized only when it serves a purpose." "That sounds limiting," Keith ventured. "It is," Megan agreed, surprising him with her candor. "I did not recognize this limitation until coming to Earth. Your species creates simply for the joy of creation. You find beauty in imperfection. It is illuminating." In turn, Keith shared with her the complexities of human relationships, the messiness of emotions, the comfort found in traditions and rituals that might seem illogical but bound people together. Like birthdays, he explained. We celebrate the day someone was born, year after year, with gifts and cake and candles. To what end? Megan asked, genuinely curious. No end, really. Just to show the person they matter to us. That we're glad they exist. Megan had looked thoughtful at this. There is wisdom in such seeming frivolity, she concluded. On the seventh night, something shifted between them. Perhaps it was the accumulated intimacy of their previous encounters, or perhaps it was simply the natural progression of their unusual bond. As they lay together, Megan's head resting on Keith's chest, his arm curved protectively around her shoulders, a new kind of silence enveloped them. Not the quiet of sleepiness or contemplation, but the charged stillness of anticipation. Keith, Megan said softly, lifting her head to look at him. I have been studying human expressions of affection. Have you? Keith replied, his heart suddenly beating faster beneath her hand. Yes, I understand that physical intimacy extends beyond what we have shared, that there are other ways humans express their connection to one another. Keith swallowed hard. That's true. Megan's silver eyes searched his face. Would you show me? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with possibilities. Keith looked at her, this extraordinary being who had entered his life so unexpectedly, who had transformed his understanding of connection, who had banished his loneliness with her presence. Are you sure? He asked quietly. I am sure, she replied without hesitation. Keith reached up slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, and gently cradled her face in his hands. Her skin was warm and soft beneath his touch, the subtle glow that emanated from it brightening slightly at the contact. Humans kiss to show affection, he said softly. Like this. He leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers, a gentle, questioning touch. For an instant, Megan was still, and Keith worried he'd misunderstood her request. Then she responded, her lips moving against his with a tentative curiosity that quickly deepened into something more confident. When they finally parted, the glow of Megan's skin had intensified, bathing them both in a soft lavender light. That was... She began, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. A first in Keith's experience with her. Too much? He asked gently. No. Megan shook her head. It was revelatory. I felt everything at once. Your warmth, your care, your... She hesitated, then used a word he'd never heard before, a musical sound that seemed to shimmer in the air between them. What does that mean? Keith asked. There is no precise equivalent in your language, Megan explained. The closest approximation would be soul recognition, or perhaps essence harmony. That sounds beautiful, Keith said. It is considered the highest form of connection among my people, Megan said quietly. It is rare, sacred. The weight of her words settled over Keith. And you felt that? With me? Yes, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. It is unexpected, unprecedented, even. My kind does not typically experience this with other species. I'm honored, Keith said, meaning it deeply, though I'm not sure what I did to deserve it. Megan placed her hand over his heart. You opened your door to me. You shared your rest, your thoughts, your comfort. You saw me as I am and accepted me without condition. Her silver eyes held his. In your presence, I am neither alien nor visitor. I'm simply Megan. Keith felt his throat tighten with emotion. And you've done the same for me. When I'm with you, I'm not just another lonely human in a world of billions. I'm seen. Megan nodded, understanding. May I kiss you again? She asked, the formal phrasing contrasting with the intimate request in a way that Keith found endearing. Anytime you want, he replied with a smile. Their second kiss was deeper, more assured, a mutual exploration rather than a demonstration. Keith felt a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the subtle glow of Megan's skin and everything to do with the connection between them, a connection that defied the vast differences of their origins. When they finally separated, Megan's expression was one of wonder and something Keith might have called joy, though he suspected the emotion might have a different name in her language. Sleep now, she murmured, settling against him once more, her head finding its place on his chest, her arm draped across his waist. Tomorrow we will explore more of this human affection. Keith pressed a kiss to the top of her head, marveling at how natural the gesture felt. I look forward to it. As he drifted towards sleep, Megan's comfortable weight against him, Keith reflected on the strange path that had led them here. 1 week ago, he had been alone, his life predictable and ordinary. Now he was falling asleep with an extraterrestrial being in his arms, a being who had shown him that connection could transcend all boundaries, even those between worlds. His last conscious thought before sleep claimed him was not of their differences, nor of the uncertain future that surely awaited such an unprecedented relationship. Instead, he thought only of the perfect peace he felt in this moment, the completeness of being understood and accepted exactly as he was. In Megan's embrace, Keith had found a home he never knew he was searching for. And in his, she had discovered a form of comfort her people had never known existed. A comfort that crossed the stars to bring two lonely souls together in the quiet darkness of night. As they slept, the soft glow of Megan's skin dimmed to a gentle luminescence that merged with the moonlight filtering through the window, until it was impossible to tell where one light ended and the other began. Much like the beings themselves, now intertwined in a harmony that neither had believed possible before that first tentative question. May I sleep beside you tonight, human? In the quiet darkness of Keith's bedroom, the answer continued to unfold. A simple yes that had opened the door to a connection more profound than either could have imagined. A connection that bridged the vast emptiness between stars just as surely as it had bridged the space between two hearts seeking comfort in a universe that could sometimes feel impossibly vast and overwhelmingly lonely. Yet in this moment, in this bed, there was no loneliness. Only the peaceful rhythm of two beings breathing as one, finding in each other's arms the comfort, acceptance, and understanding that all conscious beings seek, regardless of which sun warms their home planet or what form their physical bodies might take. In sleep, they were neither human nor alien. They were simply two souls who had found, against all odds, exactly what they needed most: each other.